Good morning, friends. Um, somebody put the asked the question, sent me an email about why my left arm is always moving during these Wednesday talks, and the reason is that my dog is always right here with me, and so I keep my hand on him, keep him calm. He's a good boy. Um, Today's talk is again from on a poem from the Theragatha, the preserved poems of the awakened monks. I always forget the number, 263 or 73 of them, and there's 73 uh, preserved poems of awakened nuns from the original Sangha. I won't cover all of them in this series, but for the time being, these Wednesday talks will be focused on these poems. They're just remarkable in their concise presentation of the entire Buddha's Dhamma. This poem today from Sumangala is just another good example of that, and it's a very short poem, but it references really everything that the Buddha taught. Come on, lay down, Boots. And this coincides with the series that we're doing here at Cross River Meditation Center in Frenchtown, New Jersey, on the jhanas. I think last night's talk on the Theragatha Sutta was the sixth in a series of what will likely be 8 or 9 talks on jhana. So jhana is simply the term that the Buddha uses to describe ever deepening levels of meditative absorption or concentration that's developed through right meditation, meaning through shamatha vipassana meditation, practice within the framework of the Eightfold Path. So the Buddha didn't teach just meditation. He didn't teach a one-fold, two-fold, three-fold path. He taught an eightfold path. And each factor of the Eightfold Path is symbiotically, how's that for creating a phrase, symbiotically significant to all the other factors. It takes a complete Eightfold Path practice to develop the profound understanding of Four Noble Truths and the suffering that comes from ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So meditation is singularly important in that. In other words, it can't be the awakened state as described by the Buddha as a calm mind holding a penetrative understanding of the nature of suffering, the origination of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. That's all part of right view. It certainly cannot be done without a proper meditation practice. So the point here is that any meditation or anything that's called meditation cannot be substituted for the right meditation that the Buddha taught. Lay down, pups. Come on. And which is often the case, even during the Buddha's time, there was this compulsive need to substitute anything other than a concentration practice, call it meditation, and then call it a Buddhist practice. So what I found, and what people that have really developed an understanding of what the Buddha taught have found, that when you substitute or adapt, accommodate, or embellish what the Buddha taught in any way, it's just another form of distraction. It's just another form of conceit or eye-making, and it simply distracts us completely out of the path. And so the Eightfold Path is lost, and there's no opportunity to develop awakening as the Buddha taught awakening. You might spend, as is often taught today, it's often taught today that awakening is really beyond our means, but if you spend endless eons practicing whatever is put out there as Buddhist practice, at some point enlightening or awakening might occur. It's just not something that the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught a very specific, and even in the sutta from last night, the Theragatha Sutta, he describes it as a step-by-step process, a very methodical way that, if engaged with, will develop awakening. And these levels of jhana, and those of you that are listening to this or will listen to this, if you haven't listened to the talks, or watch the videos on Jhana, I encourage you to do so, because it's a very, very simple subject with very, very broad and subtle applications. These levels of jhana, I remember when I was practicing in some of the more modern Buddhist schools, jhana was always portrayed, even the first level of jhana was always portrayed as something that is almost reserved for so-called advanced meditators. There's no such thing as an advanced meditator. There's an accomplished meditator, someone who has been developing shamatha vipassana meditation within the right framework and has developed ever deepening levels of concentration. But there's no such thing as an advanced practice of meditation. And certainly these levels of meditative absorption, as the Buddha teaches them, are simply ordinary states of ever deepening concentration. And the Buddha taught this primarily to recognize that our concentration practice is developing these ever deeper levels of concentration, so that we can recognize them, incorporate them into our on the cushion and off the cushion life, and also as a recognition that our Dhamma practice, our meditation practice, is actually developing the way it should. And if it's not, if we're not recognizing this, to go back and look at what we might not be doing as taught, in other words, what we might be doing, what's wrong in our Dhamma practice. So the Buddha taught right meditation, but he also taught what is wrong meditation, and he taught that from his own experience. So let me read the poem, and then I'm going to comment a little bit more. It's a short poem from a monk called Sumangala. Come on, lay down, puppy. You don't have to. Sumangala. Freedom, freedom. I am completely free from three crooked things, from sickles, from shovels, and plows. And so I just to make a quick comment there, the Buddha, the Sumangala, is saying that he's free from the common drudgery of human life by that line. It's not to say that physical work there's something wrong with it, but to be compulsively engaged in it is a prison, and Sumangala has freed himself from that prison of compulsive thought through what he'll describe now. He continues, even if they were right here, I would still be free of them. And that's why I just said what I said, that even if those tools of compulsion or the distractions are present right here, then there's no longer an attraction. Why? Because there's no longer attraction towards them to pick up these crooked things, because your mind is well concentrated. It has completely calmed. So Sumangala, affirming to himself, do jhana, Sumangala. Always mindful, Sumangala, do jhana. And that's the end of this short little poem. But think of the scope that's included in this this short and concise rendering of Sumangala's description of his own awakening. And so it always must be remembered that Sumangala was part of the original Sangha. So he learned from the Buddha that meditation is one factor of the Eightfold Path, and that the purpose of meditation is to do jhana, meaning to develop ever deepening levels of concentration, so as not to be distracted by the things of the world that we would otherwise compulsively be grasping after, the crooked things of the world. Sumangala is describing in this very concise way a calm and peaceful mind, which is the whole point and purpose of the Buddha's Dhamma, that no matter what's occurring in the world, we are able to maintain through profound concentration a mind that is always resting in peace or resting in equanimity. When the Buddha described an awakened human being from the point of view of right view, he described that right view, again, I said it previously, that right view understands the nature of suffering. It has recognized and abandoned the origination of suffering. It has brought to cessation all the factors that are inherent in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, and it has developed the Eightfold Path as the path to ending our own individual contributions to suffering, meaning ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And once that has been fully developed through an authentic jhana practice, our minds are always at peace. And just to conclude this, the Buddha would, and this is a quote that's throughout the Pali Canon, when he's directing an individual or the collective sangha to go meditate, he would simply say, go find the root of a tree or an empty hut, meaning establish yourself in seclusion, and then do jhana, meaning once that seclusion is established, then it's time and it's possible in that environment to actually deepen your concentration. So the four levels of jhana, and they're portrayed the Buddha is consistent in his description, but sometimes the descriptors are slightly different. But the four levels of jhana are simply ever deepening levels of concentration. And the first level is established by what that initial instruction is, finding seclusion. And that first level of jhana is simply the word is often used as rapture, but rapture is a somewhat archaic word, and it's often misinterpreted. In this sense, it simply means a focused pleasure on what's occurring. So the first jhana is simply becoming mindful of the breath in the body, putting aside thoughts as they arise, feelings and thoughts as they arise, coming back to the sensation of breathing in your body, being mindful of the arising and passing away of your breath in your body, and recognizing that first jhana of the focused pleasure of being in seclusion, being disentangled for the world for just that initial moment. And then the second jhana is simply a deepening of that and a recognition of the rapture or the focused pleasure of concentration. So our minds are starting to become more concentrated, resting in that initial pleasure of seclusion. And in this second jhana, directed thought and evaluation starts to fade. And what does that mean? It means that any thought that is directed towards what's occurring in the mind and attached to feelings and thoughts, resulting in evaluating, placing a value judgment on good, bad, and different, starts to fade away. And as we continue being mindful of the breath in the body, and as directed thought and evaluation continues to fade away or still, we enter into the third jhana. And as the Buddha would say, we enter and remain in the third jhana. And that complete phrase, enter and remain, can be somewhat confusing unless you recognize that is a reference to each level of jhana. In other words, we enter and remain in the first jhana, enter and remain in the second jhana, enter and remain in the third jhana. It's pointing to the impermanence of ever deepening concentration. There's not an establishment in the remaining. It just means that as we're in that level of concentration, we are aware of it. We enter and remain in the third jhana, which is portrayed as a peaceful abiding from the stilling of directed thought and evaluation. But the third jhana, that's that pleasant abiding, and in fact, in a few of the descriptions that the Buddha gives of the jhana, is now we are sensitive to pleasure, which does not mean that we are attached to the sensuality of feelings and thoughts and directed thought and evaluation applied to sensuality. We simply have developed a measure of concentration that we're now sensitive to the inherent pleasure of a pleasant abiding in the body, a mind united with its body, free of the need or free of any internal provocation towards distraction. And then as we continue our meditation practice, our shamatha vipassana meditation practice, being mindful of the breath in the body, being mindful of the arising and passing away of the breath in the body, as that continues, we enter and remain in the fourth jhana, which again is described as a pleasant abiding, but a pleasant abiding that is pure. In other words, there's nothing left to destabilize that effect of a simple, pleasant, bright abiding, being here, present, a mind united with its body, and sensitive to that pleasure that is born of a mind that has no provocation within it towards distraction, towards continued ignorance. It's simply resting. And so that fourth jhana can be seen as a more deeply established level of that first level of seclusion, because it takes that progression from first withdrawing from the world, establishing seclusion, deepening concentration, and as concentration deepens, a natural pleasant abiding occurs within the body, and ultimately it becomes well established, or that fourth jhana. And as we've discussed these past couple of weeks, every meditation session that is engaged in within the proper framework, meaning as the Buddha teaches shamatha vipassana meditation, experiences these. There's nothing extraordinary about them within the extraordinary practice of shamatha vipassana meditation. And there's no other meditation method that will develop this within the proper framework. David brought up something very significant, that ultimately this well-concentrated mind is to gain profound understanding of the three marks of existence. And again, without the focused framework of the Eightfold Path, the mind will naturally be looking for establishment anywhere, including establishment in fabricated insight, which is the problem with the modern insight movement and modern mindfulness, is this grasping after insight into impermanent and fabricated objects, events, views, and ideas, rather than a focused insight into the three marks of existence. So I think that's enough for today, and a rather elaborate talk, I think, on this short poem. I hope you found benefit from this talk, and if you did, please consider a donation at becoming-buddha.com to support the work that I do, and the website and all the rest of it. So thank you for joining. Peace.